Hello and welcome to the 89th episode of the Eat Away Kidney Stones podcast. I'm your host, registered dietitian and kidney stone expert, Melanie Betts, and I am thrilled to have a very special guest on the podcast today. Her name is Michelle Rowlett. She is a social worker and works in the kidney community, and I'll let her share a little bit more about what she does. But I'm super excited. This is unique. I tend to have dietitians on as guests, but I've been looking for a social worker because I feel like the mental health and anxiety and depression and just like all of that stuff comes along with living with kidney stones, and that is not talked about nearly enough. And so I am super pumped to have Michelle on the podcast to help us kind of process some of these things and maybe give us some helpful tips for how to deal with the anxiety that inevitably does come with kidney stones. So welcome, Michelle, to the podcast.
Hi, Melanie. Thank you so much. I'm super excited to be here. It's fun to do something different in my workday.
Yeah.
Um, I love being here. Thanks.
Yeah, yes, thank you. Thank you for taking some time out of what I'm sure is a very busy day. So let's start with just kind of sharing a little bit about you. Who are you? What do you do? What do you like to do for fun? Just kind of tell us all about Michelle.
Totally, absolutely. So I'll give you a little about my background and just kind of, yeah, who I am. So I was born and raised in the Seattle area. I am still in that area. I never left. My family's been here, my great grandparents,
Oh, wow.
everybody.
Okay.
Yeah, so long
Beautiful area.
history
I don't know
here.
why you'd leave. So,
I love it. I
yeah.
do. Yeah. So I studied at the University of Washington. I got 2 degrees there, a bachelor's in Spanish, which actually comes in handy in
Yeah,
healthcare.
definitely.
And yeah, and then my master's in social work as well. And I have been working in healthcare for about 25 years now. And so I started in the hospital setting, and I got to do everything in the hospital setting, which was great learning. And psych and intensive care and mother baby and
Mm,
everything medical med surge. And then I started in renal about 16 years ago. So I've been
okay.
working with
Long
kidney
time.
patients for about 16 years.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, and then in terms of like me, I like to do a lot of things with plants and food, and I'm kind of a little bit of, I call myself a little hippie in the city. So I live kind of in the city area, but I have a little community garden spot, and so some of my self therapy is making little projects. Like I do kombucha, and I do little, I have some honey infused garlic I'm going to cook with
Oh,
tonight.
yum.
So
What
I
are you
do a
going to do
lot
with
of
that?
little, yeah. I'm going to do like a sort of Asian sauce with some chicken. Just kind of play around with it a
Yeah.
little bit. So I'm got some cranberries infusing in honey now for the holiday
Mm-hmm. Getting
season.
ready.
Mhm.
Yes.
And then I grow a bunch of different kinds of herbs and
How cool.
foods.
Yeah,
So
very
I'm
cool.
really into the kitchen therapy, cooking
Yeah.
therapy.
How very
Mhm.
Pacific Northwest of you. You have to
It
have a
is a
little
little
bit of
bit,
hippie in
yeah.
you.
It is a little bit. And then I do my urban hiking, so I walk around the city with my music and
Yeah.
get
Awesome.
outside. Mhm.
Awesome. So you said you've been working in the kidney world for about 16 years, so quite some time. What kind of landed you there? Why have you stayed there? Why do you love working with kidney patients so much?
So it's a really fun, versatile job. It's really diverse. Like you get to, so I will say that kidney disease doesn't pick and choose. It kind of impacts all sorts of people from all walks of life. And there's all sorts of different kinds of issues that arise because, people already have whatever they have going on, and then
Hmm.
they end up with a kidney problem. So I have got to meet incredibly different kinds of people. So I've got to work with local celebrities and
Hmm.
politicians and teenagers. We get people just over 18, and so all age groups and people experiencing
Yeah.
homelessness
All
and
walks of life. Hmm.
everything. And I think that makes it really fun and challenging.
Yeah.
Um, and so, I'm never bored. Um,
Yeah.
Always engaging.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Do you work in a dialysis setting or are you in a CKD clinic setting?
So I work in a dialysis clinic. I
Hmm.
work for a nonprofit that's really small. We've got 12 clinics over 7 counties. So we're small in terms of how many clinics we have, but
Hmm.
we're a big reach.
Okay.
And um, I've been here so long that we've like doubled in size. So we used to have just like 4 or 5 clinics, and now we have 12. So that's amazing. But the other thing about my job is even though I'm in a dialysis setting, half of my job is working with patients. and half of my job is doing CKD education and outreach. So
That's
half of my
awesome.
job is
Hmm.
being in the community. I get to do cooking demonstrations, and I get to
Hmm.
do classes outside and health fairs, and go out and talk to people in the world, and then work with people with early stages of kidney disease and other kidney issues, and
Yeah.
just educate and help them kind of deal with that along the road along the way.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah, that's awesome. I think that's one of the things I like about kidney stones as well is that it truly is an equal opportunity disease. You know, it's just like kidney disease. Like you, certainly there's groups of people that are higher risk, blah, 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 but it can impact anyone. And so you're working with anyone from, I've worked with actually infants all the way up through 90-year-olds. And like, it really, it makes life interesting and just is so humbling, honestly, to think about the impact or how many people really need our help when you start to think about it, from either a kidney disease or kidney
Mm-hmm.
stone standpoint.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with that. And the other thing I'll say is like, in my experience working with people, they're dealing with such a like sort of chronic problem that doesn't go
Hmm.
away that can be so life impacting. And the resilience of people is just like so incredible to me. Like, it's
Hmm.
so inspiring. It just, every day I'm excited to go and just see like how amazing humans are, like how amazing people are and the
Yeah.
attitudes people can have. They can be dealing with all this stuff.
Yeah.
And I think about like, my frustrations, which seem so little in comparison, but it just blows my mind how people can be so amazing and
Hmm.
strong.
Yeah. Yeah. One thing that just kind of popped in my head, and one similarity, I think, between sort of managing a diagnosis of kidney disease and kidney stones that's very similar is that I feel that both conditions aren't really taken seriously, slash, are very much misunderstood.
Yep.
Like I think that can be very isolating to people with either condition, and something that people struggle with quite a bit.
That's very accurate. So what we talk about a lot, especially with like people that are newly diagnosed, is that it's a silent or not silent, invisible disease, I will
Yes.
say,
Yeah.
right? You
Hmm.
don't see that someone's sick.
Hmm.
And it can be hard for someone when they're dealing with something that you can't see,
Yeah.
um, and that people don't know about. So
Hmm.
there's a lot of either misunderstanding about what causes kidney disease or kidney issues or kidney stones,
Hmm.
misinformation, and or um, people don't see that something's wrong with you. And
Right.
people can feel exactly for that reason. They can feel isolated or alone or misunderstood or
Hmm.
not comfortable talking about it. Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Kind of going off that, I was at the Wisconsin Council of Renal Nutrition meeting last week, and I went to a wonderful session talking about the stigma of chronic kidney disease and how
Mhm.
so much, and this speaks to any sort of health condition, but we live in a society where health blame is put on people, right? Like we sort of live under this very wrong assumption that our health is our responsibility, and therefore if something goes wrong, it is something that you did wrong. You know what I
Mhm.
mean? And sort
Mhm.
of, I feel like that also in my experience being diagnosed with some chronic conditions, like that is very, very hard to
Yeah.
overcome, sort of that stigma and shame that comes along with getting a diagnosis like chronic kidney disease or kidney stones.
Yeah. 100% true. People
Mhm.
talk a lot about self-esteem loss and
Yeah.
feeling like a burden
Yeah.
to their family, feeling like, they don't want to ask for any help, that they don't want their coworkers to know. They don't want to,
Hmm.
tell people, like, even though they need like a schedule change or they need to do, what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, they're
There's a
embarrassed about
shame. It's a shame. Yeah.
Right, right, correct. Their body image, like all sorts of things,
Hmm.
like, but correct, because you should just be able to like not have this thing wrong with you.
Hmm.
Uh, like, which we all have. That's what's sort of crazy is we all have
We all have
something wrong.
stuff.
There's
We all
always
have stuff.
like I have stuff. We all have stuff. Like this is a
Hmm.
fact. No body is 100% perfect.
No.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. And so much of health is not determined, not saying that, diet and exercise is not important. Obviously, I'm a
Right.
dietitian, but so much of your health is determined by so many factors outside of your control, your genetics, your environment, your race, your age, your gender, right? Like all of these things really play into sort of have a much bigger, when you take all the other stuff into account, it actually has a much bigger impact on your health than your choices, which is both kind of freeing and maybe sort of sad depending on your perspective. But certainly, there's lots of things that you can do that are in your control. But I think it's important to have that healthy balance and realize this is not my fault, right? I feel like there's kind of a fine line there, I imagine.
That no, that's really true. And I would say even just the way the culture or the community or our country or whatever, like kind of lives and interacts with our environment
Hmm.
does impact the way that we are healthy too, right? If
Yeah.
we're living a fast-paced life and you're supposed to work all the time and run around and you don't have time to cook meals and exercise and you
Be
know what I mean, like
mindful.
all of that stuff,
Yeah.
right? Like that
Hmm.
stuff impacts the way you can be healthy too, right? If you're
Absolutely.
crunching, to work, 9 million hours a day and raise a family and do all these things to like have the right life.
Hmm.
It's really hard to be like, oh, I'm going to go for my 30-minute walk at work, and
Hmm.
not feel bad like that you're doing that too. I mean, there's a lot of like that stuff too that's just challenging to balance health and wellness with, keeping up with the Joneses or whatever the thing is, right?
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah. Absolutely. So, kind of going back a little bit, just shifting gears a tiny
yeah.
bit. So, why do people struggle? We touched about it a little bit, but I think that you have some more to say. So, why do people struggle so much with a new diagnosis, right? Why is that not always, but oftentimes such sort of a huge blow to take?
Um, I will say that life is already a challenge. It can be unpredictable, it can be hard, it can be stressful. I feel like our pace can be pretty fast. I feel
Hmm.
like we're already just dealing with what we have on our plate. And I feel like a lot of times people uh, get diagnosed unexpectedly, right?
Hmm.
So you find
Oftentimes.
something out, it's a surprise. That is just, I would say the unknown is always scary.
Hmm.
So if you don't know, like let's say it's not in your family or you don't know something's coming, it's scary. I will say also from my patients who even have a genetic like predisposition for something, polycystic kidney disease or something,
Hmm.
um, it's still scary
Hmm.
because even if you know something is coming, it's still scary when it hits because all of a sudden um, something is going to change in your life and change is hard for all of us. Like that's
Hmm.
just a fact. As a therapist, we know that, you may want to change something and it's still really hard to actually change stuff, even
Yeah.
if it has to change. And then I will say like, something I see a lot is anticipatory grief. So the concept of being afraid of something that will happen or could happen before it actually does happen. So there's this fear that
Hmm.
you can acquire when you get a diagnosis of like, maybe I won't be able to fill in the blank. I won't be able to eat what I wanted to eat like I used to, or I
Hmm.
won't be able to do what I did before. I won't be able to go on trips the way I did, or whatever. Like anything that you like doing, when you get some kind of new diagnosis, immediately I think our head starts taking us down paths of
Hmm.
like, um, I'm going to lose these parts of my life or parts of my body or parts of who I am that I like or want because this may change these things. Probably because we don't know, and or
Hmm.
it may be true, but I think we start grieving that stuff even before it like happens,
Yeah. Yeah.
and
And
all that's hard.
yeah, I feel like my therapist has mentioned this years ago. There's something called, oh gosh, there was like these like heuristics, I think is that the word? Shoot. And one of them was fortune telling that we talked a lot
Mhm.
about. So like
Correct.
is
Then that's
that's the same
exactly kind of the
concept,
same
right? Yeah.
idea. Yeah. Yeah. So during COVID, they talked a lot about, and it's the same idea, anticipatory grief. It's like you're grieving or anticipatory fear, same
Hmm.
kind of thing too. Grieving or fearing, or yes, fortune telling, you're creating ideas in your mind about something that you think will happen or could happen, and it's not even happening
Necessarily
yet.
true. Hmm.
Right. Yeah. Our brains, our minds are not always our best friend.
No, no. Yeah. I think for kidney stones, I know that that comes up a lot with the fear of not being able to make trips or big social events like, family weddings or whatever, because the fear that you're going to be passing a stone, that you won't be able to get on that flight. Like that,
Mhm.
that I know is something that people with kidney stones struggle with quite a bit.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's probably true. And I
Hmm.
think what we do a lot, one of the worst things that we do is kind of what we're talking about, where we let our emotions or our minds lead us astray,
Hmm.
um, and take us down these paths. And I think then we get stuck, and we end up doing nothing. People
Hmm.
will end up just staying home
Hmm.
and getting stuck in a space, and they live their life around their diagnosis
Hmm.
instead of taking control of what they can take control of. And you may have to make some changes or make a new plan or whatever, but getting the knowledge, empowering themselves with, the tools they can to maybe make a little bit of a different, lifestyle.
Hmm.
There's some speed bumps here, but figuring out a new way in which you can continue to do things you enjoy, because the whole point is like we want to be living our life and enjoying our life,
The
right?
point of
And
life.
so,
Yeah.
my patients that are on dialysis, we have a support group and they're really great, but they say, don't live to dialyze, dialyze to live. Like the treatment
Hmm.
exists so that you can then go out and like keep doing this. That's why
Yeah.
it's such a great thing. And so, um, I think of like a story where I had a person I was working with who had a um, bowel urgency, right?
Mhm. Oh,
Really
hmm.
strong need to go to the bathroom all the time, and was afraid to go anywhere,
That's
which
hard.
we understand.
Hmm.
Um, but developed, essentially didn't go anywhere.
Hmm.
Did nothing. I enjoyed whatever, and was a musician who was
Oh.
playing shows and stuff. And so, um, there are things you actually can do. So this person, working with the doctor, working with like what medications, working with how to change the eating pattern and the diet
Hmm.
and the timing of the eating,
Hmm.
she was able to, um, and then a therapist,
Hmm.
sometimes you need a little help,
Yeah.
was
Most
able
of the
to,
time.
right, develop
Yes.
some strategies to find a new way to do things. And so like she figured out that if she could know if like where the bathroom was in a place and know like where she was going ahead of time, kind of scope it out,
Hmm.
figure out the timing of the meals, figuring out the timing of like what medications and whatever, she was able to start playing music again and go to places. And it was a little different, it looked
Hmm.
a little different than before, but like she was able to get back out there with, some tools and
Yeah.
some new strategies. I mean, there are ways to do that stuff, but you do have to, try. But the
Hmm.
thing is, you also have to ask for help. And
Hmm.
that's another thing people have a hard time with.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
Yes, absolutely. And I think for kidney stones specifically, there's this notion that it's like not a big deal. Like, oh, it's just a kidney stone. It's almost like a
mhm,
joke. Like there's even a Friends episode where Joey has a kidney stone and it's like, ha, ha, Joey has a kidney stone.
mhm,
But like people don't realize that it does have this huge impact financially and emotionally and health wise. Like there's so many other
mhm.
like other things that go along with kidney stones. And I feel like this assumption that it's not a big deal inhibits people with stones to ask for help because they're like, what's wrong with me? Why can't I handle this? This is not like it's just a kidney stone. Like, oh my God, what's wrong with me? Right. When it's like, no, like it actually is a big deal. And there's a lot that your doctor, a dietitian, or a therapist could do to help you in all of these arenas, you know?
Yeah, yeah. I will say, like, the number one thing I think a lot of us do wrong is suppress our feeling or hide it or shift it or whatever because of those kinds of like fears or, concerns that people will judge us or, you know, oh, it's not supposed to be that or it's not supposed to be
Hmm.
this. I think, we do a lot of things with our emotions that aren't such a good thing. Like, oh, I'm not supposed to be scared. I'm not supposed to be angry. I'm not supposed to be anxious. I'm not supposed to be whatever. And so then you take those feelings and you try to shove them somewhere else, or don't deal with them. And that is like the biggest mistake you can make. So as
Hmm.
a counselor, like I tell people, kind of moving into kind of some of the coping strategies, but like number one, like, um, don't get rid of your feelings. Like your feelings are valid. We all have feelings, all of the feelings. And
Hmm.
when you do that, they're going to come out somewhere. Like your feelings are going to come out. They're going to be misdirected. They're going to, cause you to have physical symptoms. Like something's going to happen when you have those feelings. So you need to like find a way to like deal with those feelings because they're real.
Hmm.
Um, and if we don't, like something else will
Yeah.
happen.
They'll explode in probably a way that you don't want them to.
So exactly, you'll yell at the grocery store checker or
Right.
something, or you'll binge eat, or I don't know, you'll do something like that,
Hmm.
not deal with that. And I mean, um, the Buddhists are right, like if you get into that Zen thing, it's like the truth is like the best way to manage with emotions is to look at them and think like emotions aren't bad or good. They're just emotions. We're having all
Hmm.
of them. And if we can like find a way to acknowledge that like we have all of those things,
Hmm.
and then find a way to start looking at like, how do I do something with that? Then you can maybe start accessing help because the truth is it is a big deal. You are dealing with something that's going to impact your life. Um,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
so you got to
And
you got
you
to look
are,
at it.
yeah, I think another thing I see people do a lot, myself included, is uh do the comparison game and say, oh, I have it so much better than X, Y, and Z. Like I'm not worthy, or I should have it together. And I feel like that kind of plays into this suppression of your emotions and
Mm-hmm.
actually
Mm-hmm.
asking for help for sure.
Yeah, social media
Hmm.
does not help.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes.
There's a lot of things out there that make us feel like we should be, doing this or that, or so and
Ugh.
so looks happy or whatever, even though they've got this problem. And
Hmm.
that's all fake, probably. But
Yeah. Yeah,
uh, you know,
absolutely. Yeah.
there's some.
So, I want to kind of move. So we've all kind of been doom and gloom up to this point, but I promise we're going to talk about some coping strategies. Michelle has a whole list of things to kind of walk through and ways to help us deal with this. Because I know, people living with stones, like I kind of mentioned already, there's that obvious fear of passing another stone. It is associated in published data, having stones is associated with a lower quality of life, depression, opioid dependence, anxiety for all obvious reasons. Um, I think there's also a ton of financial stressors because you have a stone coming out of nowhere every once in a while, and then you have to go to the ER, and then you have to have surgery, which generally is not super affordable.
Mhm,
Um,
mhm,
and so there's, I think, a huge financial piece, and also just the fear and anxiety over those surgeries. Like people have surgery after surgery after surgery, which
mhm,
sucks. It's not
mhm.
fun to have surgery, and the fear of just the complications and just being under anesthesia, like all of those things. So there's a lot of different reasons why I think mental health suffers in people with kidney stones. So, can you kind of shed some light on how to best manage all of these emotions? Because we can't kind of walk through each of those. We only have like an hour. but,
Right, right.
but what are kind of your big tips to help people deal with this experience that happens in a lot of different chronic conditions, right? Whether it's stones or chronic kidney disease or MS or like any of these things, right? Like it's hard to handle any diagnosis. So what are your tips to help people improve their mental health when managing all of these different things?
So, I mean, you hit the nail on the head. Like, depression and anxiety are well documented, like concerns when you're dealing with a chronic illness.
Hmm.
So number one, I just like to remind people, like, check in with yourself and recognize that that could be a truth for you, and acknowledge that that's real, that that's okay, that that's something that people deal with.
Hmm.
I think it's really helpful for people to know that fact. And I think that talking to other people that deal with that kind of stuff can be really helpful, like kind of normalizing the situation. So getting connected with someone like you, or getting connected with a support group,
Hmm.
getting connected with other patients, kind of talking to people who've experienced it can be really helpful. Just in what I've seen with my patients, when you talk to someone else who's um, aware of and understands the situation, it can be really reassuring. I also just like to tell people to remember that you deserve to be kind to yourself and take care of yourself. There's a lot of like, I don't deserve this and I don't deserve that. And, I'm causing all this problem and all this financial burden, all this stuff. Like, we deserve to take care of ourselves and be kind to ourselves. And so, like, in addition to doing all this medical stuff and changing your diet or doing whatever, like, remember to do stuff you like.
Yeah.
Find something you enjoy. Like, we all have to have, something we like doing, whether it's like coloring or, finding something you get into, like my
Podcasts.
kombucha stuff, I
Yes.
mean, whatever you like, but
Yeah.
yeah, listening to podcasts,
Reading.
reading a book,
Hmm.
um, whatever you like. I mean, just remember that you need to nurture your body and your soul, like, or you're not, if we don't take care of like our whole being, we can't face anything as well as we can if we're cared for. So
Hmm.
if you don't get enough sleep and you don't eat nourishing food and you don't, take care of your mind, and you don't do things that you enjoy, which is part of taking care of your mind, then you can't face any stressor as well, um, because you're just broken down in all these different areas. And so we can't cope with anything. Our coping is reduced if we aren't at our best person, right?
Hmm.
And so that's just important, like overall, and all of that self-care stuff really is important.
Hmm.
Like it really has to happen. A lot of people
It's
don't feel
not a
like they deserve all that
bonus.
stuff, but it's not like, I'm not saying do it sometimes if you really earned it. This actually
Right.
is critical stuff you have to do every day, to be able to face anything else that's a challenge in your life, in
Yeah.
your body, in anything.
Yeah. I also liked all the examples you gave because I feel like the term self-care has kind of been co-opted by like to me, I feel like a lot of times people think like, oh, that means I have to go get my nails done or a massage or like these sort of like pricey things. And if you
Mm-hmm.
love that, then like I'm going to get my nails done later today. Like that is
Yes,
definitely part of my
right.
self-care, but it doesn't have to be, right? Like self-care can be something like reading a book, right? Or it can be taking a bath, or it can be
Mm-hmm.
um, going to Starbucks once a week and
Right.
getting your favorite whatever it is, right? Like it doesn't have to be
Yes.
these sort of like pictures of self-care that I feel like have sort of been put in our brains, probably by social media, but
Exactly, exactly. No, that's
Mhm.
the thing. It's like I have this thing in my office and it's like 50 ways to practice, self-care. And it's
Mhm.
things like taking a walk on crunchy leaves, because it's for
Oh
fall.
yeah.
And so, smelling that cup of tea that you like. I mean, it's just a reminder that, yeah, things don't have, wearing a nice cozy sweater. It's things that you can do that maybe aren't expensive. They're just things you enjoy doing that are taking care of yourself and nourishing, yourself and your whole being.
Mhm.
Um, so those things are important. The other thing I'm a big fan of is, like I was talking about, kind of with like the Buddha view is mindfulness. So like I'm
Mhm.
really into mindfulness and I'm really into the practice of mindfulness, but again, not in necessarily just the therapeutic way. So I mean, in therapy, we have a lot of practices that we've taken. This guy John Kabat-Zinn like brought us this whole mindfulness stuff. So we have like MBSR, and it's a type of mindfulness based stress reduction. And so I mean, you can work with your therapist on all kinds of ways that you can get really good tools to cope with really hard stuff.
Mhm.
But you also, if can practice mindfulness by Googling something and finding an app or a thing, or like you can just practice it really um, in your own home.
Mhm.
Simply, mindful eating. So mindfulness is essentially like focusing on one thing using all of your senses, right? So
Mhm.
it can be as easy as like, listening to the sound of the rain and really experiencing that, or like mindful eating, where you're really experiencing the meal and it's not with judgment. So it's about like awareness and acceptance. It's about like those two things. So you're just experiencing the whole thing, and just being aware of it and accepting what it is, right?
Mhm.
So this is a bowl of oatmeal and it's warm or it's cold and it's soft or it's crunchy and it's, whatever, but you're not really like judging it. You're just experiencing it. And
Yeah.
that's mindful eating. You're not watching TV and you're not stressing about your medical appointment. You're not thinking about
Yeah.
that
You're in
conversation you
one
had that didn't
space.
go
Your
well.
brain is in
Being
one
present.
space.
Correct. And
Yes.
so that's a cool thing that I think is really gaining some momentum in healthcare because we're recognizing how much it can help with so many things in terms of stress and chronic pain and like all these other things that we deal with.
Yeah.
It actually really does help us physically and emotionally
How
to,
does it help with anxiety? Can you kind of help us understand that
yeah.
connection a
So
little bit?
when you think about anxiety, some of the things we do when we're anxious is we like perseverate on something.
Hmm.
So the concept of mindfulness is like your body is right here, but like your mind is also right here.
Yeah.
And so anxiety tends to be us um, going down a spiral, like we kind of talked about, thinking about, you know, what's going to happen next, and then getting caught up on these ideas, and then, oh my gosh, and then this is going to happen, and this is going to happen, and this is going to happen, and like you future trip, right?
Hmm.
And, or fortune telling, we call it, all these different
Yeah.
things. Or you like think about something that happened in the past and you start worrying about that, like, and it could happen again and whatever. And so you like essentially can get stuck in these like loops of thought and go down these. So with mindfulness, what you're doing is you're like, you're not doing that. you're
You're
keeping
actively
yourself,
stopping your brain from
yes,
spiraling.
correct. You're keeping your brain out of those places and you're putting yourself in a present moment, like with the cup of tea. And it can be a little hard at first, which is why you need to maybe use a tool like an app or
Mhm.
something that helps you, listen to the sound or do the thing, or like there's body scans, there's different kinds of like things you can do that'll help you walk through the exercise. And it gets
Mhm.
easier with time. So the more you
Like a
like
muscle.
focus,
Yeah.
right?
Mhm.
Practice, the easier it gets and the longer you can do it. There's a practice from Japan that was started in the 80s by the forest industry because they wanted people to come out and like take care of the trees.
Okay.
It was called a Shinrin Yoku or forest bathing.
Okay.
And also there was the tech boom in the 80s, so people were stressed out and they're like, maybe this will help them like chill out. And now it's like a scientifically based like research thing. There's like 65 certified forests in Japan. And now it's all over. If you Google forest bathing, like I have a friend getting married and I looked up where the, lodging was and stuff. And it's like, oh, and you can go forest bathing when you stay here because it's all over the place. The UW Arboretum here in Seattle has like a page about it and you can go
Oh.
walk through the forest there. And the idea is like, again, getting into the, like being in the trees, being
Hmm.
present with the trees. You're not like walking around with your Instagram, doing the tree thing, like and you're not like on your phone texting your friends. You're literally like being present in nature,
Hmm.
experiencing it. So lots of times they'll pair it with, some kind of mindfulness based activity like yoga in the forest or,
Hmm.
something else like, identifying like something about the trees. Um,
Yeah.
but something about, 2 hours a week or 20 minutes a day being out
Okay.
in nature, just really experiencing that can actually
Hmm.
significantly reduce stress and everything because it's again helping you be present in the moment, getting rid of that wandering mind, paying
Hmm.
attention to something else that's like just right there, right now in front of you.
Yeah.
Uh, can really it's essentially just slowing your mind down and getting
Hmm.
it out of the gutter, like
Yeah. Yeah. That
get out of
spiral.
there.
Yeah.
Hmm.
It's so cliche, but for me, the first time in my life, honestly, where I like like I've heard of mindfulness, right? You're like, okay, fine, cool. Like I've heard of meditation, okay, fine, cool. But the first time that I really understood what that meant and the value of it for me, because I do struggle with chronic anxiety for sure, was yoga and actually COVID. It was a silver lining of COVID
Hmm.
for me because I couldn't go to the gym anymore. And so I was like, okay, like I like yoga, like I'll start doing it. So that was my only option for movement other than taking walks outside. And so I started doing yoga with Adrienne, if you've heard of her. She's amazing. She's
Hmm.
on YouTube. She has lots of free stuff. And it was the first time where I was like, oh, like kind of like it made me realize how much my mind was spinning. And it was
Hmm.
the first time in my life, quite frankly, where I was like, oh, like this feels so good to like stop it. So for me, yoga has been a huge tool in this arena.
Yep, yep. And that's one of the mindful based activities that they do.
Hmm.
That meditation is
Hmm.
another. Um, and a body scan, like I mentioned, where you kind
Yeah.
of go through your body and how it's feeling and checking in with kind of yourself. And that can even be an entry point into journaling, which is another. So
Hmm.
gratitude journaling is something else people will do where you're specifically writing down like 3 to 5 things that you're grateful for every day and
Hmm.
focusing your mind in that positive mindset.
Yeah.
That has been shown to have a lot of benefits as well because you're kind of forcing your brain to be like, here's a positive thing that I'm going to focus on every
Right.
day.
Yeah,
Um,
just breaking it out of those habits,
correct.
those negative downward spiral habits, I
Yeah, because
feel
we
like.
literally develop like cognitive pathways in our brain where they like
Hmm.
go down a particular route and we have to change that into like a different route if we want to try and
Hmm.
help ourselves have a different way of like it's
Yeah.
called like positive reappraisal, and so you're
Okay.
changing your brain into reframing essentially like the way we're looking at a situation. And there's a lot of research around that as well. Now people are working on teaching people how to positively, I mean, you can do it about anything, right? So
Yeah.
it can be like, oh, here's my pitcher of water, I just dumped it across my laptop, and you can either like freak out and start, screaming at the computer or something, or you can say, oh, hey, well, I didn't break my arm. I mean,
Yeah.
that's a sort of extreme example, but, there's a way to positively sort of reframe or think about
Hmm.
any situation.
Yeah. I love the idea of it being like a muscle. Like you have to work it out, right? Like if
Mhm.
you uh get in the habit of stopping that spiral, then you're going to be less likely. It's not going to stop it, I imagine, right?
Right,
But you're going to
right.
be less likely to spiral, and it's going to be easier for you to rein yourself back in when you have worked out those brain muscles.
Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, that's correct.
So much good stuff there. Any more on mindfulness? I think that you had a couple other tips, right? That we wanted to
So,
cover.
well, in terms of mindfulness, I guess the other thing I'll say is like even this is really simple, but
Mhm.
even just positive self-talk.
Ugh. Or stopping the
Um,
negative, even just being neutral.
correct. Even just positive self-talk, um, which is more of just like being present in the now, but then like what you're experiencing, it's sort of that same thing. It's not anxiety so much, but it's something that we do a lot, I would say, in terms of
Hmm.
that feeling like a burden, lack of self-esteem or lowered self-esteem about a situation. Um, it's something we do. It's like cognitive behavioral therapy. It's one of those things where like we have this particular behavior, we're thinking this, and what we do is then we say this thing, and you have to kind of like practice saying, no, actually, here's this other thing. It's like
Hmm.
I suck. I've just, had too many surgeries this year, whatever. Okay, well, maybe not. Actually, I'm helping myself be healthy so that I can
Hmm.
continue to do like, play with my grandkids or whatever. You know what I mean? Like there's a different way to say something to yourself. And the more you say these positive things to yourself, the better you're going to be able to approach a situation and the better you're going to feel. So that like really helps with self-compassion too. But
Hmm.
again, it's something you have to practice. And sometimes people will even actually like stick reminders on their mirror
Hmm.
or, you know what I
Set a
mean? Put
reminder on
signs
your
in the
phone
ground.
to pop up every
Mhm.
hour or something. You are
Correct.
worthy, or whatever it is.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, Saturday Night Live had that like Stuart Smalley or something. There's a guy that used to like say things like that, right?
I
When I
don't.
was growing up. But yeah, it's
Yeah.
it's really hard, but any of that kind of stuff where you can really be present and then kind of work on changing what you're doing with your mind.
Hmm.
Because like I said earlier, it's like your mind isn't always your best friend.
Hmm.
Like when things are really challenging, sometimes you can just go down a really deep path.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. Um, I wanted to bring this up earlier, but then we kept going and we're having such good conversation. But something that always is fascinating to me when the self-talk arena is, or something that's helpful to me, I guess, is thinking about, is this something that you would tell even your worst enemy? Like you wouldn't even speak, much less to like your mother or your daughter or friend or whatever, but even like your worst enemy. I feel like I'm meaner to myself, and I feel like a lot of people are, than you would be to any other human being. Why do we do that? Like, why are we so mean to ourselves and so hard on ourselves? We have such different expectations of ourselves versus others. I think for stones, it comes up a lot. Like people feel, I have this diagnosis. I'm not a healthy person, right? Like sort of that very black and white thinking. And then you think, oh, I'm such a failure. I'm such a bad person, right? It just kind of spirals.
mhm.
But you would never think those same things like if your best friend got kidney stones. You would be filled with compassion and empathy. But for some reason we don't do the same thing for ourselves. And why is that? Like why are we so mean to ourselves?
You're always the worst critic, right?
Oh,
Aren't
it's
you?
the
I
worst.
mean,
Yeah.
I think that I don't know if that's something to do with like our environment and how like society is.
Hmm.
But I think that we've always sort of been taught that we're supposed to do more, better,
Hmm.
stronger, harder. Do you know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
there's
It's
always
very,
this
very American
expectation.
like
Like
culture.
even if you're like, leg falls off, like you're supposed to just keep
Be
going, you know
fine.
what I mean? Like,
Hmm.
that's sort of there's a mentality that like you can't really take a break, be easy on yourself, slow
Hmm.
down. I mean, there's just this kind of like idea that it's never good enough, right?
Hmm.
Um, you have to just keep going and be perfect, right?
Yeah.
Um, and and there's also this idea that you can't be mean to other people, right? You're supposed to always be nice to other people,
That's
even if
true.
they're
So
not
maybe
nice
you
to
just put
you,
it all on yourself
right?
or
I
something.
mean, you can't, yeah, right? You're not supposed to be mean to other people. You're supposed to like just take it no matter what. Like there's sort of
Hmm.
this really big imbalance that we have. Um, and it, I will say it's really hard for people to be nice. Like one of the first things I said was be kind to yourself because I feel like it's really hard for people to be kind to themselves. It's like it's really easy to feel like you don't deserve kindness or good things.
Mm-hmm.
It's really a challenge for people to think that they deserve what they would give anybody else.
Mm-hmm.
And it must have to do with our culture,
Something. Yeah.
or the way we were raised, because it is very common that one of the hardest things that people struggle with is like giving themselves what they would give someone else.
Mm-hmm. Which is fascinating. And I think that's a good check, at least for me, to be like, is this the what you would expect of your daughter or my best friend, right? Like, would you say these things? And 120% of the time the answer is no. So I feel like that can be sometimes a useful tool for that self-talk, or like pretend that you are talking to someone else.
Yeah,
Hmm.
that's a practice we do in therapy is role
Okay,
play.
cool.
You
Maybe I
talk to
should be a
yourself. You
therapist.
literally like go from one chair to the other and you like talk to yourself.
Oh, yeah, that's kind of fun. It's very like Instagram reel. You know how people do that all the time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I don't know if the self-esteem thing has to do with I think it might have to do sort of with some of that anxiety as well, you know what I mean? And like your mind.
Hmm.
But like I said, sort of your mind is not your best friend. I think our minds are created to sort of take us down these roads. And I
Hmm.
think that um, it to some extent it's good. I mean, it's survival instinct to like,
Look
fight or
for look
flight.
for threats, right? Isn't that kind
Right.
of, yeah. Hmm.
But the problem is like, we're not really a threat to ourselves. And you have to kind of
Definitely.
like step outside of that and be like, no, like
Hmm.
you're just as deserving as the next person.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. Other tips on mindfulness, or did you have more coping mechanisms for us to go over? Can't remember.
Well, one thing I will say is like, I think we have a lot of specific expectations that we think people have on us or of
Mm-hmm.
us that aren't always true and also don't matter.
Hmm.
So um, sometimes we're really hesitant to do a lot of things because we worry so much about what other people think or are going to think, or what we're supposed to do, that we don't do what we should do to take care of ourselves, right?
Hmm.
So um, let's say it's like taking care of ourselves, like the 30-minute walk at work or something, right? Oh, well, I should be sitting at my desk working the whole time. I shouldn't take that break. People will think I'm goofing off, or, or whatever. Like, um, that's maybe not even true.
Hmm. You're
Um,
assuming.
and you're entitled to taking a break, and you should be taking, breaks, and it's good for your health to take a walk. And, but I think sometimes we like make up our own ideas and worries about judgment. And so maybe we don't choose to eat the right things or do the right things, or prioritize our health and our wellness and what we need to do because we're so worried about perception,
Hmm.
um, in a lot of different settings.
Hmm.
Um, and so um, people that really accept us, like I think a lot of times we worry about like what our friends are going to think, or like
Hmm.
what, people are going to think of us in a social situation. If people really are genuinely, and this is where it's like it gets hard because maybe you need to weed and purge your friend group. But if
If your
people really
friends are
do
really
care,
judging you like that.
if they really are judging you, like um, maybe you got to change who you're hanging out with,
Yeah.
because you really should be able to make the right choice for yourself and do the right things for yourself in an environment. I mean, if you're at a job where you really aren't allowed to take like a lunch break and take a walk, that's probably not good.
Hmm.
Um, so but I do think that our actions sometimes are like based on an idea we have in our head of like what'll happen if I, you know, choose that drink instead of that drink or whatever.
Hmm.
Because people then think this thing about me, I'm
Hmm.
not fitting in or doing like what everyone else is doing and stuff. And
Yeah.
it's like people, if you're around the right kind of people, they should be able to let you do what's best for yourself.
Yeah. I hear
Yeah.
that a lot, surprising a lot from people with stones who might be at a holiday party or something, and they are making choices to eat less of the really salty things and make sure they include more vegetables, or maybe bring their own dish, all these things, right?
Right.
And I hear a lot that their friends sometimes don't understand or like, oh, it's fine. Like, it's not a big deal. Like, just have this. And like, although it's totally fine, all foods can fit. And if that's something you want, like, please, please, please have it. But if it's not something that really brings you joy and you're just eating it because it's kind of expected and your friends aren't understanding, like, that is either a conversation you have to have with them or to your point, you know, is that someone who's really some a benefit to you in your life, you know?
Right.
Hmm.
Right. Those are a long time ago. I learned, just in social work, like sometimes we just have people around us that, you know, we help and we get nothing in return. Like, it should be a two-way street. You should get
Hmm.
benefit both ways. And I was told, like, weed and purge. Like
That sounds
some
so
people,
harsh,
it
but
does, but some people, just if I would rather do my laundry than like spend time with someone, then I probably should maybe spend less time with them. Um, so
sure.
you really should. It's important to take charge of your own life and your own environment, um, and put yourself in a situation that is best for your health and wellness, in
Hmm.
a way that will allow you to live like a life that you enjoy that is best for you. And kind of back to the point of where we sometimes have these negative thoughts, we don't deserve
Hmm.
whatever. Sometimes we just move along in this way. But bottom line, like we are responsible for everything that we are doing. And if we don't take any action, then you know, we're responsible for being unhappy. So, um, we need to be in the driver's seat of our own life and take charge and
Hmm.
make sure that
Harsh.
we are doing what we can in
Yeah.
our environment to
Hmm.
make it the best place for us to thrive.
Yeah. Harsh but true.
Mhm. It is. It
Yeah.
is.
Yeah. Yeah. And reminding yourself that you're worthy of that, like kind of going
Right.
back to your points earlier, that if you don't do these things, if you don't do what you can for self-care and to make yourself happy and work on your mental health, you won't be able to handle that diagnosis as well,
Mhm.
or handle that next stone that you have as well, or whatever other curveball life throws at you,
Correct. 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 That bill you
Um,
didn't expect in the mail, whatever.
yeah,
Yeah.
I find that especially women, culturally are expected to give and give and give and give, right? And so when you ask them to maybe take a step back and do something for themselves, it's like, no, there's no way I can do that. And sort of, I don't know if this is healthy or not, actually, tell me if it is or not, but kind of reframing it and being like, in order to be the mom and the wife that you want to be, you have to take care of yourself in order to show up the way that you want to, you know?
That's correct.
Hmm.
That's exactly what I'm saying is you can only give so much. Like, um, you can suck the vegetable dry or carrot dry or whatever the expression is, like you can't um, but you have to nourish anything in order for it to be able to continue giving, right?
Hmm.
It's just a fact. And
Yeah.
so, my job is about giving like all the time, emotionally, like giving to people.
Hmm.
And so I learned early on that's part of the weed and purge is like I can't just have friendships where I'm giving my soul and they give me nothing back in
Hmm.
return. And I don't need a lot, but like just like maybe, hey, how are you?
Right.
Um, you
Once every
know,
6 months,
just
something.
something, right? You know,
Yeah.
um, so if I don't nourish myself, I can't take care of
Hmm.
other people well. And I mean, that's my job is to take care of people. So if I can't take care of people well, that's not going to be very good.
Hmm.
But so that means I have to have those self-care practices that I really enjoy. And I have to make sure that I have relationships that are meaningful for both of us and,
Hmm.
take care of all of those things for myself so that I can be good at taking care of everybody else. And like you
Yeah.
said, women are in roles quite often where they are the caretaker and the nurturer.
Hmm.
In healthcare, you see quite often that the daughters end up being the caretakers and the wives end up being the caretakers.
Hmm.
And that is true. And you have to take care of yourself. I mean, you get on an airplane and they're like, make sure you put your mask on before you get the
Right.
mask on the other person. Like it's
Right.
just a well-known fact that you
Yeah.
need to, help yourself so you can help other people. So
So it's not really being selfish, taking care of yourself.
not, it's necessary.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Any other pearls of wisdom that you have for us today?
Uh, I would say you can get through anything as long as you recognize that help is out there if you're willing to ask for it.
Hmm. Yeah.
Mhm.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Michelle. This was an amazing conversation, and I know that it will be hugely helpful to many, many of my listeners. Both from I know that I have an audience of people with both kidney stones as well as kidney disease. There's a lot of overlap there. So I know that people will get a lot. So thank you so much for taking time to be with us today. Can people reach out to you, or where can people reach you if
I was going to say,
they
yeah,
they
absolutely. I'm
want to?
always very available to anybody. So you can share my LinkedIn, you can share my email, and I work at Puget Sound Kidney Centers, so I'm sure
You're
you
in
can
the
find
Seattle
something
area.
on there. I'm in Seattle. I'm usually running around giving talks or something too. I do a lot with National Kidney Foundation, so I'll be in Boston at our spring clinicals, and
Hmm.
I'm doing a talk for the Northwest Renal Dietitians in Seattle
Oh, cool.
next
Hmm.
year. I'm kind of just doing things all over the place, so
Awesome.
feel free
Well,
to find me wherever.
I will definitely link to your LinkedIn page if people do want to connect with you for whatever
Sure.
reason. I'll put that in the show notes of the podcast. Um, but yeah, thank you again so much. Any last words? Any last closing remarks for us?
It's the holiday season, so just remember to take care of yourself in the way you like to,
Yeah.
and like like I said, reach out if you want anything else from me. I'm
Hmm.
happy to help anybody.
Right.
And it was wonderful being on your show, Melanie. I
Oh,
really
thank you.
enjoyed
I'm
it.
glad that you enjoyed it. I did as well.
It was a breath of fresh air to do something different, like I said, and I really enjoyed our conversation. So thank you for
Yes.
having me.
Thank you. This was a much needed topic for the Eat Away Kidney Stones podcast. So thank you for being my guest to dive into all of this because it's certainly not
Absolutely.
my area of specialty as a dietitian. So
Love it.
yeah. All
All
right. Well,
right.
thank you everyone for joining us for this episode of the Eat Away Kidney Stones podcast. And I will look forward to seeing you next Wednesday. Have a good day.
Bye.